I'm Mackenzie Reynolds, 34, and I drove through a snowstorm for 6 hours to get home for Christmas. When I came for supper, fatigued but optimistic, I found my seat at the. Eleanor, our neighbor, had been given the family table. She's alone this year, my mother said, waving dismissively, so we. I nodded and said, sure. I then observed as they all laughed together. I assumed you would be comfortable sitting in the kitchen. If you're watching, please leave a comment with your location and click subscribe to join my. Growing up as the middle child in the Reynolds family and learning to set limits and value oneself was. My parents always seemed to have space, so it was never easy from my earliest memories. Everyone, with the exception of me, believed that my older sister Kayla was the ideal child who was incapable of doing anything wrong. Received first dibs on everything, including bedroom choices, when we relocated to finance my younger brother Derek's college education. Wasn't as popular as Kayla, but he picked up the habit of following our parents' example early on, so I was always the odd one out. Even after 34 years of living with this reality, I still fervently want there. It's funny how ingrained those childhood habits are, even after relocating to Chicago and establishing a prosperous financial analysis profession, I discovered. Regularly sending money home, I paid off half of each parent's mortgage. Paid their streaming subscriptions for the month and frequently assisted with power expenses when. I told myself that the reason things grew tight was because I cared, but I knew deep down that. Was still attempting to purchase the affection and respect they didn't seem willing to freely offer, and my life in Chicago was hectic. But rewarding. I was just promoted at Weston Financial Group, where I oversaw high-net-worth clients' investment portfolios. The promotion came with a hefty pay increase. But also more responsibilities and longer hours. My partner Tyler couldn't keep up with my ambition and dissolved our relationship. 3 months into our 3-year relationship, Mackenzie stated, "You're never going to be happy. Dispute, you're constantly aiming for something that's just out of your grasp, like a better job, more money, or your family's." His remarks hurt because they were true, but when is it enough? However, I wasn't prepared to abandon any of my objectives, including establishing a genuine bond with my family, which is why. Instead of using the convenient excuse, I persisted on driving home for Christmas despite having little vacation time. I had a lot of work to do because I had to prepare for this Christmas visit. Decided that this year would be different for my father and spent weekends looking for the ideal presents. I discovered a remarkable. Almost $1,000 was spent on my first edition Civil War history book. I got my mom a fancy purse that she had been eyeing online but would never. I bought Derek tickets to see her favorite band and Kayla tickets for herself. As a graduate student, he was unable to purchase the newest game console, thus the gifts were my way of expressing I'm sorry. Observe me without having to say the words out loud since I carefully wrapped each one in pricey paper. 2 weeks prior to Christmas, with the satin finish and hand-tied ribbons, I put in 14-hour days to get my calendar cleared, and Janet, my employer, saw the dark circles. In my opinion, you might simply send them gifts instead of making the long travel, especially given the. At our most recent discussion prior to the holiday, she stated that the prediction seems dubious. Custom, I forced a smile in response, adding that I hadn't seen them since last. Janet said, Christmas is your choice, but don't check your email while you're. The weather forecast indicated a possible winter storm sweeping over the Midwest, so you really need a break. I texted my mother on Christmas Eve, though, since I wasn't going to let that stop me. She kept asking whether I could bring anything and confirming dinner time in the days before my trip. We're usually served a quick meal at 6 p.m., and she didn't need to bring anything. We'll have a few extra guests this year, she said in the message, but she didn't specify, so I figured she meant the customary. Plus a couple of neighbors who had no family in the area, which was typical for our Christmas get-togethers as my parents prided themselves on being hospitable, and I departed Chicago on Christmas Eve at 7:00 a.m. The first 2 hours of the road were clear, and I hoped to arrive with plenty of time to get settled before supper. Listen to Christmas music and practice the talks I envisioned having with my family in my head. They inquired about my life after being astonished by my promotion and genuinely hearing my responses, and by the 3rd hour, the snow began to light up at. Initially, it became heavier until I could hardly see 20 feet ahead of the 6-hour drive stretch since I had to reduce my speed to 30 miles per hour in certain places, which I dubbed my. I called my mother twice to let her know how I was doing, and she responded, "Don't worry if you can't make it." Strangely optimistic tone, "I'll be there first, safety first," I said, holding on to the wheel. Wheel tighter, I may be a bit late, but I'll get there. I stopped several times. In order to stay awake, I took breaks to wash my windshield and get coffee at a gas stop in northern Indiana. Families hurrying in and out with lunches and last-minute presents for their festivities. Everyone appeared so happy and confident of their welcome that I envied them. Assurance when I eventually arrived at my parents' Grand Rapids Street. It was about 5 p.m. in Michigan, and I had been driving for almost 6 hours when the sun had already begun, and Christmas lights and decorations had completely changed the area, with each house vying to be. As usual, my parents' house was tastefully prepared for the most celebratory occasion with I sat in my car with a modest multicolored light string down the roof line and an illuminated wreath on the front door. Reapplying lipstick and gathering my strength in the rearview mirror will be different this year. Said to myself the same phrase I used with renewed vigor every Christmas. With resolve, I took the exquisitely wrapped presents out of my trunk and made my way to I knocked on the front door arms, anticipating the warm reception I had been driving toward all day. Loaded with my overnight luggage and meticulously wrapped goodies after a minute I had to put everything down in order to turn the handle myself, which made for awkward waiting. I entered the house and was immediately struck by its warmth and the smell of my mother's cooking. "Hello," I said, mingled with cinnamon and pine from the Christmas tree. In the foyer, I stomped the snow off my boots and declared, "I made it." My mother came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on Her face showed a hint of astonishment, as though she hadn't actually. Despite our several discussions about my journey, she expected me to arrive. "Oh, Mackenzie, there you are," she remarked. "We were starting to worry that you might not make it after all, but there was no hug or sign of relief as we looked at the clock." She didn't offer to help with my baggage or goods after I had safely traveled 6 hours on dangerous highways. Said, "Dinner's almost ready, you can put your things in your old room," and turned back toward the kitchen. Said, "You should join us at Boone Mountain since you used to ski." The ski trip was my last present to the family. I had planned and mostly funded a weekend retreat last year, and now they were uninvited. I sat 10 feet away and casually invited Eleanor. My mother called from the dining room, but I didn't recognize it. "Would you mind serving the dessert? There's apple pie on." I stood quietly gathering information from the counter and Eleanor's putting in the refrigerator dessert dishes and carefully slicing the pie as I set up Eleanor's. Putting on a platter, Kayla walked into the kitchen to get more wine, asking if it was okay to play kitchen assist. She smirked and muttered, "Very domestic," so I kept quiet and concentrated on my work while When I got back to the dining room, I sensed a tectonic shift inside of me. Plate of emotion gradually increasing the strain. I served dessert, gently setting each plate in front of the customers who. Father was so absorbed that he hardly looked up to thank me as I put down the last plate. Spoke with Eleanor regarding the community garden initiative she oversaw. "We could definitely use someone with your." Eleanor, the committee's financial specialist, was telling my father, "The grant applications are very complicated, but I'd be happy to review them," he said. Despite the fact that Mackenzie is the family's true numbers person, too bad she's always so busy in Chicago. For the first time that evening, he made direct references to me, not to me, but about me, as though I were a distant relative. Instead of his daughter standing there, I went back to the kitchen and started doing the routine chore of washing dishes. Activity that gave my hands something to do while my thoughts were racing and I could see my reflection in the window above the sink. Pallid and blurry against the darkness outside, resembling a ghost haunting its own life in. I recalled something my therapist, Dr. Walsh, had mentioned during our. Sometimes the most considerate thing you can do for yourself is to stop going to the last session before the holidays. Mackenzie, it's not selfish to demand basic respect, you're not valued. As I dried a serving dish, I did the necessary mental math to figure out how much money I had. Considering my family, the mortgage help for the last 12 months alone has exceeded $15,000 for streaming services, utilities, and random. I had already paid for Derek's emergency demands, but they added many thousand more. Laptop for graduate school and paid for my parents' house's plumbing repairs last spring. Support, and they were unable to accommodate me at the dinner table. I considered my Chicago-based pals who had nearly pleaded with me to visit her family's home, inviting me to participate in their Christmas festivities. Wisconsins are noisy and perhaps obnoxious, but they will fall in love with you right away, and there's always too much food. I stood by my commitment to decline, determined to uphold my family's custom. I felt a final shock while I was by myself in the kitchen, hidden from the people whose lives I had helped support. After gently wiping my hands on a dish towel, I made my way to the closet in the foyer. I got my coat and handbag back with no ceremony or announcement, and nobody saw. The snow had ceased by the time I slid out the front door into the chilly December night. And I stood on the porch for a while until the sky cleared, revealing a canopy of stars over the quiet neighborhood. Feeling oddly light as you breathe in the chilly winter air despite the heaviness of the evening. I brushed off the gathered debris and proceeded to my car. I left my parents' house in the snow and drove away without turning around. At first, the streets were filled with people who had no specific destination in mind. Christmas Eve is largely deserted, with the possibility of a car passing by. Following roughly 15 minutes of haphazard twists, I found myself on my way to family events where they were truly wanted. The Grand Plaza Hotel was located on the main road that led to downtown Grand Rapids. Warm and welcoming, its lobby windows are lighted against the night sky. I entered the building after pulling into the parking lot on a whim and asked, "Are there any rooms available for tonight?" I inquired with a young man in his uniform with a Santa hat working as a receptionist seems taken aback. "Actually, we had a cancellation about an hour ago, family, on Christmas Eve." The irony that someone who wanted to be here couldn't do if the weather was caught in Chicago didn't escape my notice. I'll accept it since I, the one who made it, no longer wanted to be here. 20 minutes after I slid my credit card across the desk, I felt at peace. I sat on the edge of a cozy room on the 8th floor that overlooked the city's Christmas lights. The bed, still in my coat, attempting to comprehend what had happened that evening when the phone rang and a text message came in from Kayla. "Wow, I can't take being." I peered at the message, overlooked real mature walking out on Christmas Eve. I was so furious that I shook my fists and shook my sister, who had everything we had ever owned together, was accusing me of being immature for. Finally defending myself, my phone rang before I could answer, saying it was Rebecca. When I replied, "Just checking," she said, "Merry Christmas, stranger." In to check on the family visit's progress. "It's not," I said I'm at a hotel. "What happened?" I cracked a little. The worry in her. My own family's voice was immediate and sincere, something I hadn't heard in years. I described the circumstance, from having to drive 6 hours to being confined to the kitchen counter to walking away undetected. "They complete jerks," Rebecca remarked after I was done. I apologize, Mac. That was extremely disrespectful, and the worst part is that I don't believe they're probably still sitting there, I continued, not even realizing how hurtful it was. Enjoying a wonderful Christmas Eve with their neighbor Eleanor, who isn't even missing me. "So, what will you do at this point?" she asked, and when I glanced around the hotel room, it felt like an order. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm done being taken for whatever comes next." Granted. I removed my outerwear and placed my laptop on the desk after we hung up. I went to the bill pay portion of my banking app, which contained all of my recurring payments for the family were planned, and the mortgage aid was scheduled to be disbursed on the 1st of the month. When I clicked on the payment a week ago and chose to freeze it, a caution message appeared. "The recipient won't get the money until it's unfrozen, so are you sure you want to freeze this payment?" I paused for I reviewed my utility payments for a moment before pressing yes. Since my parents retired early and lacked adequate savings, I froze them for electricity, gas, water, and internet. Every click felt more powerful than the one before, and at last I signed into I purchased for a streaming service account, but I seldom ever utilized it, but my family did. History continuously revealed that they were currently viewing the brand new Christmas film that they had been anticipating all year. I logged out of all devices and updated the password this week with a gloomy smile. Imagined their movie abruptly ending in the middle of the scene, and when they were unable to log back in, their uncertainty turned to realization. I felt a little satisfied as I thought about it, but almost instantly my phone started to. My father's phone rang, so I put it on voicemail before receiving a text. "Could you please fix the TV so that they only noticed my absence?" When it had an impact on their amusement, more texts quickly followed. "Mom, where have you gone?" "Dad, the movie stopped working, and the password isn't working either." "Everything is well, but Kayla ruined Christmas Eve, and now Derek is unhappy with Mom." "What's happening? Did something happen?" I disabled the alert noises and set. Putting the phone away, I opened my laptop once again and started figuring out how much. Over the years, I had supported my family financially, and the number was astounding, well into 6 figures. Instead of paying off the mortgage on a house where I wasn't even wanted, money could have been used to buy my own house. Money from the dinner table that could have paid for trips I never went because I was too busy working to provide for two. Those funds that, rather than supporting my family's affluent present, could have been invested for my own future. My phone rang once more, and this time I took my father's message. He said, "Don't bother with a greeting, we can't get it," as soon as the movie ended. There was a delay after I gently responded and updated the password. "We were all watching, so why would you do that?" "I saw that's apparently. How long does it take you to realize that I'm leaving to stop your movie again?" "I left more than an hour ago, Dad, and I walked straight out the door." "Where have you gone?" "We were occupied with supper and visitors, so nobody even looked up when I brought my coat to the front door." He added defensively, "If you had replied, 'Pardon me, but I don't want to sit at the kitchen counter.' Like an unwanted extra, you're overreacting in my seat as you all eat dinner with the neighbor on Christmas Eve." Regarding the sitting arrangement, having Eleanor at the table made more sense because she's older and I stopped the daughter who pays half since she drove 6 hours through a snowstorm to get there. "All of your streaming services, including your mortgage, which I've cancelled." His tone abruptly changed. "What do you mean, cancelled?" "I'm done, Dad," he said. "I've frozen all of your mortgage assistance utility payments after serving as your ATM and being treated like an afterthought. Everything you need to manage your finances, together with your mother, Kayla, and Derek." He sputtered that since we're depending on that money for the January payment, you can't do that without me going forward. "Have you considered that before you placed me in the kitchen and gave Eleanor my seat?" "This is about more than just a seat." Over the table, and you know what I said, I was surprised at how stable my voice stayed this way after years of being denied the opportunity to have my sentiments disregarded, of being treated as though I'm not as important as everyone else. Done. I hung up the phone because he was still objecting, and a few seconds later, texts started to come in. "Coming in once more, Mom. Your father claims that you're severing our financial ties at." "How could you be so mean, Kayla? You're self-centered, and you know they. I know you're unhappy, but I need that money, Derek. Can we talk about this?" Seems severe, so I shut off my phone entirely since I couldn't take it any longer. Their only concern was their self-serving responses. None of them had shown regret or even admitted that they had harmed me. Worried for the money they would lose while leaning back on the hotel pillows, I experienced a range of complicated feelings. Yes, I was satisfied, but I also felt a great deal of sadness and lingering uncertainty. Gone too far? Was I being spiteful or petty, or was this the appropriate boundary setting I had talked about? Frequently with Dr. Walsh, I opened my laptop again and wrote Rebecca an email. Inquiring as to whether her family's Christmas invitation was still available, I placed a modest but respectable room service order. Christmas Eve meal for one, and as I awaited the food's delivery, I took out I had brought a novel for the vacation, but I didn't anticipate having time to read it for the first time that day, possibly It was both frightening yet the first time in years that I felt in charge of my own decisions regarding my family. I woke up feeling as if I had just stepped off a precipice and realized I could fly. I was momentarily confused on Christmas morning as sunshine streamed through the motel drapes that I had neglected to close. Anticipating to see my father's office transformed into the familiar walls of my childhood bedroom, followed by the events of came racing back the night before, and I had a little panic attack since I had interrupted my family's finances. I had left them during supper on Christmas Eve and shut off. I took a deep breath as I realized what would happen if my phone disconnected entirely from the consequences of my actions. I put my phone on the nightstand and turned it on right away, and it started buzzing with all of the notifications I had accumulated. Family members accounted for 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, 5 voicemails, and 3 emails. Members, I had a long, hot shower and ordered breakfast from room service rather than getting caught up in that digital maelstrom. By the time I came out wearing the luxurious hotel robe, my breakfast was. I ate beside the window while pancakes, bacon, fresh fruit, and strong coffee arrived. Seeing families covered up against the cold on the street below, perhaps on their way to Christmas. Christmas Day was the first time in my adult life that I was by myself at a gathering. The insight wasn't as heartbreaking as I may have thought. There was a certain freedom and tranquility in the alone. After breakfast, I took a seat on the bed with my family, away from the usual stress that came with family get-togethers. I began with the texts, and now my phone is finally prepared to handle the deluge of messages. Going back in time, the previous ones were irate and accusatory, so Kayla turned the streaming back. Now when you're wrecking everything, Dad, this is unacceptable. Call me right away, Mom. I'm shocked that you would humiliate us in this way. As the evening wore on, the mood started to change in front of Ella Laner. Look, I understand that the seating issue offended you, but interrupting everyone is rather harsh, Mom. Please give us a call. Where are you staying, Dad? It's unsafe to drive back to Chicago in this weather by midnight. We're worried about you. Please just let us know you're safe, Mama. A sense of desperation had crept in. Okay, Kayla, I apologize for what I said. Please answer your phone. I sighed. A complicated range of feelings, and I felt validated by their care while another group was concerned, certainly, but more about the manipulative undertones in some of the texts. My mother's voice in the voicemails expressed similar sentiments regarding the financial ramifications of my departure. The last one sounded really emotional, Mackenzie. Please give us a call. I don't comprehend the situation, but we can discuss it. It's Christmas, and I was going to check my emails when I came across one. The communication that caught my attention came from my neighbor Eleanor Thompson, not my immediate family. She had. My seat has been assigned. It was sent at 10:05 p.m. Mackenzie. This is Eleanor. I just found out about your mother's condition next door, and although you might not be aware of it, I believe there has been a horrible misunderstanding. Please give your brother a call as soon as you can. Your family is in greater need of you than ever right now, especially my mother's. I went through my mind, wondering what ailment was causing my confusion and acute anxiety. Mails once more, searching for any reference to my mother's illness, but finding none. Explicit, but looking back, some of Derek's letters appeared to allude to. There's more going on than you realize right now. Mom truly needs everyone to be aware of this. Supportive at the moment, preventing tension with trembling hands. I called Derek, and he. Finally, after answering on the first ring, he muttered, "Where are you?" in a tired tone. While I'm at the Grand Plaza Derek, Eleanor texted me to tell me about her mother having a condition. There was a prolonged silence followed by a deep sigh that she was not supposed to reveal. You made us pledge that none of us were moms. Tell me, Derek, what's wrong with Mom? Her breast cancer diagnosis made my heart race, and suddenly my fury was being replaced by worry. Stage 2 cancer 6 weeks ago, she begins chemotherapy the next week. Cancer struck me like a physical blow, but why didn't she tell me that she didn't want to? She believed she was protecting you because you claimed to be preoccupied with being promoted and getting over your split. I repeated incredulously that you were protecting me by keeping me out of. Derek replied, "We should tell you about something this important," but Mom was. She was determined to have a typical Christmas before everything changed, thus. Eleanor was present. Ever since learning she had cancer herself, she has been assisting Mom with appointments and other things. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed to attempt to comprehend all, and she has been a sort of guide throughout it all. Information that my mother had cancer, something I was unaware of. Huge obstacle, and while I sat at the dinner table feeling sorry for myself, why didn't somebody tell? When I left, I asked my petite mom whether she was upset, but she didn't want to make a scene. When the streaming stopped and Dad spoke to you, he was attempting to keep things normal for her. He was going to tell you about Mom's diagnosis, but he didn't want to. Did you realize that I was paying half of the mortgage payments when we drove to your hotel this morning? Derek was quiet. Not exactly how much, but I knew you helped for a brief period of time that I was unaware of till. Dad had to retire early last night due to a heart problem he had last year, and They are having more difficulties than they realize, and the medical expenditures are rapidly mounting. With insurance, every disclosure was a new puzzle piece that I was unaware I was putting my parents' pride in. Precluded them from disclosing their financial circumstances honestly, just as it had prevented them from informing me of my. I needed some time to process my mother's cancer news, so I finally told her. I'm safe, Dad. Tell Mom I'll give her a call later today. Will you return? I don't know yet, the home Derek said. I need to process all this after hanging. I got up and sat there, gazing at the wall and the story I had made up about my family's behavior of me was being changed in real time. Kept me out of the dinner table, but not because they didn't value me, rather, they were attempting to utilize their erroneous how to accommodate Ella Laner, who had reportedly been my mother's support system, but still having a typical Christmas. I checked my email after her initial diagnosis and treatment planning, and discovered a lengthy message from Eleanor detailing her transformation into. I apologized for taking my place at dinner and was involved with my mother's care. I was unaware that they hadn't informed you about. If I had known Margaret's diagnosis, I never would have consented to attend. I apologize for my mother's last email, which was sent at 3 in the morning. I believed I was protecting you, but now I realize I've caused you great pain, regardless of what you choose to do about it. I apologize for not showing you my love more, Mom. I shut down my laptop and stood up. Thank you for the financial assistance. Going to the window to observe the activities taking place on Christmas Day below. The typical holiday scenes I see include families strolling together, laughing, and carrying gifts. Had spent 6 hours driving in the hopes of joining the rage that had motivated my behavior. Last night had mostly subsided and been replaced by a complex mixture of hurt, worry, and residual bitterness. My family had been wrong to keep me out of the table and to keep me in the dark about my mother's condition, but I took revenge. Although emotionally fulfilling at the time, financial isolation now appeared too unreasonable considering the situation I was unaware of, so I grabbed up my phone once more and went to my banking app. I put the other payments on hold and unfrozen the mortgage payment before logging in. Returning to the streaming service, changing the password, and sending Derek's phone the new one, these were little actions that were the first steps toward whatever would happen next, since I wasn't prepared to understand the years of being neglected and undervalued, but I also couldn't deny my mother's condition or my family's sincere need for. With fresh insight, I started packing my overnight bag because it was time to go back home. My parents' home, not with the fervent desire for acceptance that had first brought me there, but with the fortitude to. This Christmas had not gone as planned, but I was able to speak my truth while still providing assistance where it was most needed. Maybe it was just the upheaval my family needed to begin speaking honestly with one another and return to. Despite being little, my parents' house felt important because I had left the previous. I was going back that evening as a furious daughter who was resolved to sever relations. Additionally, I wasn't positive who I was going back as, but it was someone else. I stopped in the driveway in search of someone who was determined to conduct long overdue chats and had fresh information. Instead of demonstrating my position in the family on the street as I could see people moving through the windows in the living room as I got closer to the front door, and the flickering light of. I tapped on the television, feeling oddly more like a guest than a. My father's face was startled when a family member opened the door, but he covered it up with a hesitant smile. "Mackenzie, you came back. We need to discuss," I said plainly. "All of us?" He nodded and moved out of the way to allow me to enter the living room where my mother was seated. Kayla was on the couch the day before, and the regular armchair appeared more brittle than I had anticipated. Eleanor was conspicuously missing Mackenzie, my mother, while Derek and Melissa sat on the floor next to the Christmas tree. Began to get up, but I told her to remain seated, saying, "I think we should have a family meeting." I continued, staying upright. "If this is about last night, there are things that need to be stated." Derek interrupted Kayla with a stern look, saying, "Let her speak." I silently inhaled deeply after learning of Mom's diagnosis through a text message from Eleanor. And Derek clarified a few things for me, so I now know why she attended dinner last night, but I still don't understand. Is the reason none of you informed me of anything so crucial, my mother's eyes brimming with. "You've been working so hard," and with the tears, "I didn't want to bother you. Break up with Tyler, which wasn't your choice." I strongly stated, I'm your daughter, and I should be aware that my mother has cancer. I'm a child who has to be shielded from harsh realities. We felt we were doing the right thing when Father stepped up since we didn't want to burden you and you're always so busy. Dad, you didn't protect me, you excluded me. Being involved in significant family problems isn't a burden, it's a fundamental right. Just as you didn't invite me to the dinner table last night, Kayla moved. Unfortunately, that was only a seating arrangement, you're exaggerating it beyond what it actually is. Something more significant, which I insisted was a pattern that I've always been supposed to comprehend and make. Arrangements to sit in the kitchen while everyone else is given a seat at the table. And metaphorically, that's unfair. My father objected, but his tone lacked conviction. It's unfair that I've been providing for this family for years without getting any credit or finding out from a neighbor that my mother has cancer is unfair, and driving 6 is unfair as well. Hours in a snowstorm to have my remarks handled like an afterthought, weighed down by years of silence. I was shocked to hear my mother say, "You're right," breaking the hush. Whispered, "I realize now that we've taken you for granted, Mackenzie, and I'm really—" "We all owe Mackenzie an apology," she said, turning to face the rest of the family. "She has been giving of her time, money, and affection, and we really apologize. Haven't been fully returned." My father glanced down at his hands, indicating that the financial assistance had been more crucial. "You know, following my heart attack last year, the medical expenses and early retirement, without your assistance, we would have lost the house. I was too proud to acknowledge our need for you, and now that Mom's illness has cost us money," Derek said. With my voice a little softer, I replied, "You should have told me, things are going to be even tighter." Helped nevertheless, but I had to be asked rather than assumed to supply without. I felt envious when Kayla said, suddenly, "Surprise everyone, you've always been the intelligent, successful person with a solid career and stable finances." It was simpler to minimize your efforts rather than acknowledge that I was jealous of what you've done. Her sudden candor briefly. "I don't want your envy," I murmured, robbing me of words because this was more vulnerability than Kayla had displayed in years. In the end, all I want is to be included in the family and treated with the same respect as any other adult. I want a seat at the table for decisions in family crises, both literally and— My mother nodded figuratively, blotting away the tears, "And I assure you that we can do better." Can do better, so I urged them to unfreeze the mortgage payment, but moving ahead, I'm glad to assist, but it's necessary to set some expectations and limitations. Must be publicly discussed rather than assumed, and that's more than reasonable, my father. "Yes, I spoke with my mother, and I would like to know all about your diagnosis. And the treatment plan is no longer shielding me from reality." She acknowledged that it is stage 2. When I begin treatment for breast cancer, the prognosis is actually pretty favorable. Chemotherapy the following week, followed perhaps by surgery in the spring. Eleanor has been really helpful because she has experienced radiation herself. "I should have been told," I remarked. "I would have wanted to be there for you from the start, and now that she's acknowledged it, my voice is cracking a little. Was wrong to conceal it from you, now that we're having open discussions." Derek got up. "You should also be aware, Mac, that we weren't leaving you out of the ski vacation you mentioned last night. You informed us months in advance that you wouldn't be able to attend your major industry meeting in New York, so I blinked in an attempt to recall that he was correct. I had declined due to the conference I was attending. Totally forgotten about in the moment's intensity." "Oh," I said, blushing with shame. "Forget that," and my father added that we should have been more explicit about the New Year's gathering. "We thought you wouldn't want to take another lengthy travel so soon, but we ought to have invited you specifically." The discussion went on. There were more tears as we each shared our viewpoints and hurts that had been suppressed for years for more than an hour. There were times of defensive posture and some heated words, but there were also sincere apologies and promises to alter. By the time we were done conversing, it was almost time for dinner, and the leftovers from Christmas meal were taken out of the fridge, and we all sat at the dining room table this time. As we ate, we worked together to make space by bringing in extra chairs from the study. Instead of our typical holiday banter and Kayla's small talk, the topic was different. Dominance. We discussed actual issues, like as my father's and mother's treatment plans, Derek's thesis progress, my recent promotion, and adjusting to retirement. Perhaps for the first time in years, I felt the projects I was working on. My family didn't magically heal the hurt, but I knew we would have more challenging discussions in the future, but it was the start of a new foundation based on truth rather than conjecture and bitterness, so we traded the unopened presents after supper. From the previous evening, the pricey gifts I provided were accepted with sincere gratitude. But what really made me cry was the handwritten card my mother gave me, which she had written to my daughter, whose courage and accomplishments motivate me daily. "I apologize for not telling you that. Enough love, Mom," when Eleanor came over for a quick visit that night to make sure there was no awkwardness with my mother. Instead, I praised her for supporting her, for having the guts to write me that text that altered my life when I couldn't be. Families are. As she walked away, she smiled knowingly and remarked, "Complicated, but worth fighting for." I came to see that she was correct. My family, like other families, had serious flaws. Their own ways, but despite the financial constraints, they were mine and I was theirs. Assistance I gave or the blood requirements, but since in spite of everything we decided to give it another go in order to better understand one another and create something better than what we had previously. When I first arrived at my parents' house, I had no idea how the rest of Christmas Day would turn out. After our essential but stressful family meeting, a peculiar stillness settled in the house. Over all of us, it wasn't the fabricated piece of unheard complaints, but rather something more genuine, the silent comfort that arrives. My father proposed that we move the dining room table to make it more inclusive once the storm had passed. We added seats from all around in a little but meaningful gesture that was recognized. The house, making it a cozy yet mismatched location where everyone could gather for our warm Christmas meal. Leftovers and shared meals in a family-style setting instead of being served separately, as we had previously done. I've been considering. My mother mentioned how much effort I've put into keeping up looks when we were eating. In the dim light of the dining room, she appeared weak but resolute rather than focused on what truly important. Knowing that she had cancer altered my perspective of her, causing me to see the subtle indicators that I had previously overlooked. Moderate weight loss, sporadic bouts of discomfort, and exhaustion behind her eyes. The news of the cancer diagnosis has been terrible, but it's also. I've been making it clear that I don't want to waste any more time on pointless customs or worrying about what my neighbors may think. We all chuckled when Eleanor Derrick made a kind joke, though, since she deserved it. As the strain eases even more, I'm afraid, my mother said, her voice faltering. This woman was the most vulnerable I had ever seen, and the treatment seems almost as terrifying as the illness. She had consistently put on a flawless front for the public. You don't have to face it alone, I said, grabbing her. I can take some time off work and be here for the first time, said the hand across the table. You do that after how we treated you, rounds of chemotherapy? Her voice was surprised. Was yet another heartbreaking reminder of how low she had lowered her expectations for our relationship. That's what family does, I said. Answered with the real kind, not the pretend version we've been playing at. That evening, we discussed our worries candidly, including my father's and mother's fears about cancer. Kayla's worry of losing her is incomparable to Derek's fear of my anxiety of constantly being on the outside looking in and disappointing everyone. While occasionally awkward, the candor was also freeing when it came time to unwrap presents. The pricey items I had brought didn't seem as significant as the rare Civil War book caused my father's eyes to expand as we continued our conversations. And my mother reverently brushed her fingertips over the high-end purse. Mackenzie objected a lot. Perhaps I admitted that I believed I was attempting to purchase. I no longer have to do that to feel valued because the healing process had barely started, but I could already sense the difference from the initial discomfort of. Perhaps we were seeing each other clearly, and confrontation and honesty were giving way to something healthier. Over the following few days, I extended my stay in Grand Rapids for the first time. I went with my mother to a pre-treatment consultation and asked her questions that she had been hesitant to ask. Established a system that my father could continue to manage after I helped him arrange their insurance documents and medical bills. Back to Chicago, I also had a number of candid discussions with Kayla, whose since we were young, our relationship has been tainted by my competition, but without the distraction of attempting to win our favor of our parents. We found that we genuinely shared a dry sense of a penchant for overanalyzing, a fondness of esoteric documentaries, and a sense of comedy. During a late-night conversation, she said, "You had it all figured out, including the ideal job and stable finances." The assurance made me feel inadequate in contrast, but believe me, I don't. I reassured her that I had everything worked out and that I had simply improved my appearance. And I tried for years to get our parents' favor, so perhaps I'm the one with the more serious problems. We both laugh. Before leaving for Chicago, I took a seat for a little moment of sisterly bonding. With my parents to establish clear boundaries regarding financial support, I would continue assisting with my mother's medical bills but pared back other aid, urging them to establish a sustainable budget. The topic was painful but important, and I was proud of us all for having it. We could have been more honest about our predicament, my father said. Pride is pricey, so is resentment, I said. I'd rather know the truth even when it's tough. 6 months later, much had changed. My mother was halfway through. Despite the negative effects of chemotherapy, she had a favorable outlook. I went to every month, working with Derek and Kayla to make sure someone was always present for significant appointments, and my family's connection had changed in ways I never. As anticipated, we had set up a weekly video conference to share information. To be honest, instead of viewing everything through a prism of perfection, my father had begun sending me articles on finances. Mark, it's a brief recognition of my understanding that he had not before. In an act of professional deference that meant more, Kayla had suggested me for a speaking engagement at her business. Derek had been the most dependable supporter throughout it, more so than any Christmas present. All the link between my parents' adaptation to my new restrictions and you. Know how it felt to finally break a script we'd been mindlessly following when you left on Christmas Eve? It was uncomfortable as I followed for years, he informed me on a recent visit. Terrible but necessary. That Christmas Eve taught me a great lesson. Wasn't what I had anticipated. I had entered expecting gratitude and left wanting respect. What I found in. Since genuine family isn't established on ideal vacations, the fallout was more valuable than either authenticity. Real family isn't sustained by financial assistance or duty, whether it's through dinners or who sits where at a table. Formed in honesty, which becomes stronger even when it hurts at first. Through difficulties encountered together, accepting one another's imperfections, and loving in whatever form limits are necessary as. As much as it calls for forgiveness, it also calls for honesty and charity. We had to face our mortality after our mother's cancer, and in doing so, given how transient our complaints were and how easily we could lose each other at any time, did it really matter who sat where at dinner? Moment, of course not, but the fact that we all felt appreciated and involved did matter. Heard that I had used my success to buy a place in the world for years, confusing love with financial support. My family had been emotionally distant from me and had taken that support for granted for years. The greatest present we could have given one another, as I anticipate next Christmas, was that unhealthy cycle. Being unique rather than flawless is no longer the aim. Instead, we'll sit. Instead of using platitudes, we will speak the truth at a table where everyone has a place. And if you're viewing this and acknowledging your own presence, we'll respect it more than each other's. Familial habits, and I hope you have the guts to break them when needed. Being honest isn't cruel, it's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It takes courage, and sometimes letting go is what allows us to reunite. I'd love to hear your tales of difficult holiday times or family changes in the comments section below. Have you ever had a painful conversation that improved your relationships? If so, please like and subscribe. Struck a chord with you, and please share with someone who might require authorization to establish their own limits during the holiday season. I appreciate you sharing in my journey, and I hope you have genuine holiday relationships with the people you care about.